That's great. That's awesome. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I love that. I love that. Welcome, everybody, this morning. Welcome. As we prepare to get started, we've got some great inaugural activities already happening. Andrew Polanecki's handing around these baseball card style stickers of great Holy Cross brothers. So get the complete set. You know, we've got Andre, we've got Servant of God Columba. We also have Father Moreau. So those are making their way around. Our man of the weekend, Dr. Clark, is making his way around, and we are ready to kick off these inaugural activities. I'm Dr. Michael Griffin, Provost of Holy Cross College, and I want to welcome you and everyone who is watching on live stream. We have Liz and Tanner back who do all of our live streaming sports here at the college. So when they came up to me and told Brother Philip and I where the mics are, where the cameras are, I knew they came up and you knew they're sports guys. Tanner comes up, he's like, all right, we're gonna go get the starting lineups, we're ready to roll. We got play-by-play. So they are doing a different kind of event. But we are very, very grateful, all of the sports that Tanner and Liz helped to stream from Holy Cross. And while not an activity on the court of athletics, we certainly are on the court of academics. And that's how we wanted to start these inaugural festivities, with our academic symposium and a showcase of our Catholic, Holy Cross, liberal arts education here at Holy Cross College. And so it is my privilege to introduce our first speaker and our first topic. Brother Philip Smith has a long history, not only with the great tradition of the Holy Cross Brothers, but with the great tradition of Holy Cross College. As he was telling me before, on 4 occasions has he been a professor at Holy Cross. First in 1975, when he worked for the great founding president of Holy Cross, Brother John Driscoll. And then as a good provost, I of course asked if he would like to teach under our newest great president, Marco Clark, and he said, no chance. Those days are over. However, what he has moved on to from his days as a professor is certainly of great interest to us. He is now the archivist, who is the custodian, the steward, and the educator of the entire congregation and the educator of the entire world about the history of the Holy Cross Brothers, and in particular, the brothers who have been in this land, in this province, in this place. And it is that work which brought him to discover the man whom he will talk about today. The other aspect to note about Brother Philip, before he addresses us and teaches us about Brother Columba, is he also has one of the most unique roles possible in the Catholic Church. He is a postulator. This is not a title that is often given, since it is rare when the church gathers its resources, gathers its people, gathers its collective energies to consider canonizing someone. But that is exactly what is happening in this case. And as postulator, Brother Philip Smith is right at the center, helping not only to educate us, but to bring to the world, to bring to the church, the story of a would-be saint. Therefore, join me in welcoming Brother Philip Smith to present to us on Brother Columba O'Neill, the miracle man of Notre Dame, in kind love.
Professor. I'm not sure that professor is it, but welcome to everybody. Good morning. I'm very honored to be asked to give this presentation on Brother Columba and life, lore, perhaps some legend, and what I'll call perhaps the road to sainthood. And I think in the tradition of Brother Columba, you perhaps received this card as you came in. On the back is a prayer I'd like to begin with. Everybody who ever wrote a letter to Brother Columba, who ever talked to Brother Columba, normally had someone in their life who was in some kind of desperation. Lots of physical desperations, spiritual desperations, what we might call psychological desperations. Someone they were concerned about. Someone, perhaps, who had gone to all kinds of doctors and professionals and received no respite at all. And so the respite now comes in the form of Brother Columba. Will you please remember the intentions of whoever it is in a novena before the Sacred Heart of Jesus and the Immaculate Heart of Mary? And so he actually created a prayer and a formula that you were to use if you were interceding to gain a favor or a cure, and dare I say, in quotes, a miracle. And so if we could begin in the name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, amen. Brother Columba, I ask you to intercede for me through the Immaculate Heart of Mary to her Son Jesus. State the need to yourself. Again, take this need and place it in your heart, Lord. I place all my trust in you. Amen. And then below is a formula that you would use. Big things happened in novenas, and also it's very simple. St. Joseph prayed to the Sacred Heart. Use the badge. We'll talk about the badge and so forth as I begin this morning. I'm going to give you about a 20-minute presentation, and then I'm certainly open to a question-answer situation. I'm going to try not to mess anything up here and so forth. I have a series of slides. They're basically all pictures and photos or images of things that I will refer to in this presentation. It's called In Kind Love because in every letter we have written by Brother Columba, and we have several of them in the collection, he always ends with, In Kind Love, Brother Columba. And I think that in kind love, K-I-N-D, being kind, being compassionate, being merciful, is the true hallmark of this man and his engagement with not hundreds, but thousands and thousands of individuals across the United States and Europe and as far away as Australia. In the Midwest Province archives, there are approximately 6,000 items related to servant of God, Brother Columba O'Neill. Among the 5,000 letters in the collection are 47 that were written by Brother Columba, 40 of which were written to his friend, Father George Giglinger. It works. Father Giglinger was the pastor of St. Mary's Church in Keokuk, Iowa. Brother Columba became acquainted with Giglinger because his older sister, Elizabeth O'Neill, and several members of the extended family were members of Giglinger's parish. From at least 1907 through 1918, Brother Columba made several visits to Keokuk to his relatives, during which he was asked to see people seeking intercession through the hearts of Jesus and Mary for cures of their afflictions. The Giglinger letters begin in 1907, and they end on September 18, 1923. Brother Columba died on November the 20th, 1923. It is highly probable that there are far more Brother Columba letters written to Giglinger that were not saved by the priest. In 1933, now this is 10 years after Brother Columba died, Father Giglinger returned his saved letters to the congregation, specifically to Brother Ernest Ryan, who was writing Brother Columba's biography entitled These Two Hearts, which was published in 1948 by the Dujarrier Press, which at that time was located on the second floor of the now named Columba Hall, then at that time called the Community House. Along with Giglinger's Columba letters, the archive also possesses 49 letters written by Father Giglinger to Brother Columba, another 30 letters written by Lida O'Neill, Columba's niece, and to a number of Holy Cross religious, Brother Columba, Father Joseph Gallagher, who was the superior of the community house when Columba died in 1923, and to several brothers, including Brother Ernest. There are also 2 letters written by Columba's older sister Elizabeth, who he always refers to as Liza or Mac. Her married name is McNamara. The information in these 150 or so letters, along with hundreds of biographical snippets gleaned from the 5,000 letters written to Brother Columba from persons seeking intercession, provide a far more complete life of the miracle man of Notre Dame than what has been written by Brother Ernest in his book. The honorifics Miracle Man of Notre Dame and Divine Healer first appeared in an article in the South Bend Tribune in 1916. The article celebrated the new shrine of the Sacred Heart, housed in the old log chapel, which would be maintained by Brother Columba as its guest master. I'm going to shift now and talk a little bit about what is often asked of me: what is Brother Columba's spirituality? Well, that's a very interesting question, and Brother Columba never wrote much about his spirituality, but from lots of things one can gain some kind of an insight into that. Brother Columba's vocation, his calling and response, are similar to that of St. Francis Assisi. Francis provided this answer to his friar's question when he was asked about the meaning of their own vocations. He simply responded, to lift up people's hearts and give them reasons for spiritual joy. To lift up hearts and give reason for spiritual joy. The saint goes on to say about himself, quote, "And so, in order to do that wonderful work which he intends us to do, he did not find on earth a more ordinary creature, and therefore he chose me. For God has chosen the foolish things of this world to put to shame the wise, and God has chosen the base things of this world and the despised to bring to naught the noble, the great, and the strong." End quote. This is taken from the Little Flowers of St. Francis, written in the late 14th century by Father Ugolino de Santa Maria Bunforte. Like St. Francis and St. Andre Bessette, Brother Columba was a very ordinary creature. In fact, he was a deformed man, born with clubbed feet, who was not expected to live long after his birth in Mackie'sburg, Pennsylvania in 1848. He was born as the 5th of 6 children to Michael O'Neill and Ellen McGuire. The 2 oldest, Patrick and Elizabeth, were twins born in Kilkenny, Ireland. There is evidence that the baby Patrick, died while on ship sailing the young family to the States, and was buried at sea. By age 14, in 1862, John felt called to do something for God. Because of his complete trust in divine providence and God's goodness and compassionate mercy, he lived his adult life as a brother of Holy Cross, devoted to work and prayer, praying for suffering persons drawn to him because of his devotion to the Sacred Heart of Jesus and the Immaculate Heart of Mary, while he worked as a cobbler and a shoemaker at Notre Dame. Thousands upon thousands of persons across North America and Europe and in Australia knew of the divine healer and asked for Sacred Heart badges, for photos of Columba, and for his powerful prayers and novenas offered for their distresses. His life of heroic virtue, his holiness, was based upon a simple formula: pray constantly and intercede to Jesus and his Immaculate Mother through devotion to their hearts. Thus he was a common man who led a very uncommon life because of his complete and indefatigable faith in the power of God to show mercy to his people. Like St. Andre Bessette, there is never a time when Brother Columba takes credit for any healing or favor received. I assume that he thought he was an instrument of God, declaring that he was not the player of the instrument, but the one played upon by God. He certainly believed that his personal prayers and novenas, and the prayers and the novenas of the sufferer, would be heard by Jesus and his Immaculate Mother as surely as you and I believe that we'll take the next breath and we will see tomorrow. The funeral oration for Brother Columba was delivered by Holy Cross Provincial Father Charles O'Donnell on November the 23rd, 1923. This celebrated Holy Cross priest and poet began his sermon with the words of St. Matthew, "Learn of me, for I am meek and humble of heart." Christians also know that Jesus proclaimed, "Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth." Authentically meek persons like Brother Columba place themselves under God's authority and control to be useful, obedient servants. They follow God's lead, they trust him, and they go where he tells them to go. They do what he tells them to do, even when there is much evidence that doing so will result in personal embarrassment, perhaps great failure, and certainly some great physical suffering. Thus, for me, authentic meekness is strength under control. Strength under control. John O'Neill's early life is emblematic of such meekness. The club-footed John O'Neill set out for California from Pennsylvania in 1862 as an apprentice to an itinerant shoemaker, Ted Morgan. Brother Ernest reports in his biography that John O'Neill could be frequently found in prayer before the Blessed Sacrament in towns where Catholic churches were. Early on, he went to daily Mass and received daily communion if it was provided. He plied his shoemaking trade in these towns until there were no more clients, and then moved farther west, eventually arriving in California. It was there that he wanted to join the Franciscans, but according to Brother Ernest, was denied because of his disability. Having been on the road for 11 years, at age 25, he met another shoemaker, Johnny O'Brien, who had learned the cobbler's trade at the Manual Labor School on the campus of the University of Notre Dame. This fellow persuaded John to travel to South Bend because he felt certain that the Holy Cross congregation would welcome John among its members. In early July of 1874, John O'Neill makes his way to Denver, where he runs out of money but is, quote, provided with the money to continue to South Bend, Indiana by train. He arrives at Notre Dame on July 9, 1874, where he meets university porter and guest master Brother Francis Xavier Patois, one of the original 6 to travel with Soren to South Bend, and Father Augustin Louage, the novice master. The picture of Louage shows him as a bishop because he was the first bishop of Bengal. These two men take Columba, or take John at the time, to meet Father Soren. On September 8th, John O'Neill receives the brother's habit and the name Columba. Father Soren considered no gift too small offered by men and women who wanted to join Holy Cross. He was building an army of Christ that would firmly establish Our Lady's University on a lasting foundation to become a bastion of Catholic education and, quote, a little bit of Renaissance Paris in South Bend, Indiana, end quote. Let's now recall the second virtue mentioned by evangelist Matthew, humility, though I am meek and humble of heart. St. Teresa of Calcutta speaks about humility this way: humility is truth. Therefore, in all sincerity, we must be able to look up and to say, I can do all things in him who strengthens me. By yourself you can do nothing, have nothing but sin, weakness, and misery. All the gifts of nature and grace, you have them from God, end quote. And so authentic humility is more than the capacity for truth-telling. It is to be so free of arrogance that you can do nothing but speak the light of truth in the many darknesses of this valley of tears. Father O'Donnell offers additional insights about Brother Columba and his holiness in his funeral oration. Quote, he was so wise and so sincere. His humanity was so broad. His piety was so plain and practical. The humble cobbler had somehow learned to mend immortal souls. Something for us to think about here. This again is, I think, his holiness. And I conclude that he was holy because he was consistently in prayer. He was an amazing individual. He wrote thousands of letters. He mended shoes. He traveled across the country on what might be called curing tours. And he turned no one away who needed his help. I suppose he did not have today what we might call a tribal mentality. He was just not interested in Irish Catholics and their woes. Anyone who came to Brother Columba received prayer, an audience, so to speak, and so forth. There are many letters from non-Catholics and from people seeking prayer for those who either do not practice any religion or who have fallen away from practice, in those days doing your duty. In one letter to his friend Father Giglinger, he says that Protestants get it far better than many Catholics. What is it that they get? Perhaps Brother Columba is speaking about the depth of their faith in prayer. How did Brother Columba's reputation as a devotee of the hearts of Jesus and Mary and as a healer spread beyond Notre Dame? First, through word of mouth. Hundreds of letters begin with, I have heard of your wonderful cures from, and then a name is mentioned. Also because of the Holy Cross brothers who lived with Brother Columba, and by those brothers who canvassed for the Ave Maria Press. These brothers traveled throughout the United States and Australia from 1870 to 1970, seeking subscribers for the Ave Maria magazine started by Father Soren in 1865. Another source was the Holy Cross priests who were members of the mission band. These priests, most of whom were not academics, traveled across the country giving missions and retreats. Holy Cross Father Joseph Boyle was a member of the band and is mentioned in 3 1921 letters as a person who recommends that the writer contact Brother Columba for prayer and intercession. Boyle remained on the mission circuit until 1928, when he was appointed the 8th president of the University of Portland. Brother Columba's notoriety was also reported in newspaper articles. In 1916, the South Bend Tribune published the lengthy article, Miraculous Cures Attributed to the Shrine of Notre Dame. The article includes a photo of the Shrine of the Sacred Heart located in the Old Log Chapel and provides much information about Brother Columba and the origin of devotion to the Sacred Heart. This is the writer who also uses the titles Miracle Man of Notre Dame and Divine Healer for the first time in print. In 1917, this notice appeared in the South Bend News. Brother Columbia, C.S.C., who has charge of the Sacred Heart Shrine at Notre Dame, in the future will be at the Old Log Chapel on Sunday afternoons from 3 to 5 o'clock to meet visitors. The Old Log Chapel has been completely overhauled and will serve as the Sacred Heart Shrine until the new building is completed. I need to go back, I think. All right. The new building would be completed in 1919, and it is now the parish center for the Basilica of the Sacred Heart. From 1919 until 1957, this building served as the college seminary, Moreau Seminary. Its chapel was to become the Shrine of the Sacred Heart, so desired by Brother Columba. At the west end of the building, there are a set of doors that provide an entrance to the shrine without having to enter the seminary. These doors, I believe, are permanently closed now, but outside the doors, you'll see a large statue of the Sacred Heart with a bunch of benches around it. It's looking like something the Boy Scouts might have created. There is also a 1918 article written by the Reverend Carl F. Brunn in the Joliet Evening Herald News. Brother Columba reported to be making progress, no religious impostor. The Reverend Brunn was a Protestant minister who was the religious editor of the paper. What follows now are a series of direct quotations from an extremely lengthy article. Quote, "This man has a childlike faith." Quote, "Brother Columba has said that the power is not in himself." Quote, "He seeks no publicity nor personal recompense for his work." Quote, "Brother Columba says that he has cured people who were insane, blind and deaf and speechless, many affected with cancers and others with rabies and lockjaw." Quote, "He says that 1,300 cures have been the result of correspondence with those who could not come personally." Quote, "When asked if faith was necessary on the part of the individual seeking relief, the healer said, 'No one can expect to be cured if he is neglecting his duty. The Lord can heal these people, but is not likely to do it. To cure the body is no real blessing unless the soul is cured also. Some pious people are not cured, and it seems as if the Lord cannot make saints out of some people unless he knocks out the props from under them." Quote, "He makes no distinction between Catholic and Protestant so far as healing is concerned." Quote, "When asked the method of cure, he said, 'This is not Christian science, but this is prayer to the Sacred Heart of our Lord.'" Quote, "The badge of the Sacred Heart is given to sufferers, and a special prayer is repeated. Protestants are told to pray in their own way. Epileptics, tubercular sufferers, and afflicted people of every kind are being brought to the Delancey home. There are many letters in which individuals invite Brother Columba to come back. They will house him. And so I believe the Delancey home is where Columba was staying when he was in Joliet. Were being brought to the Delancey home or visited by Brother Columba. The number of cures in Joliet thus far is more than 20. Quote, "No record of names is being kept, as there is no attempt to advertise, except by those who are helped, and they tell their friends and others." Quote, "He seems to be absolutely sincere, and none of the marks of a religious impostor." Final quote, "No money is asked for his services." On December the 7th, 1919, the South Bend News-Times reprinted an article from a newspaper in Kankakee, Illinois, with the title, "Brother Columba, call him Miracle Man of Notre Dame, tell of wonderful cures." Quote, "In spite of his numerous and wonderful cures, the Miracle Man is unable to account for his strange powers other than that they are made by faith. He effects his cures by means of devotion to the Sacred Heart of Jesus. He blessed the affected parts with a badge of the Sacred Heart. His cures are just as successful with non-Catholics as with Catholics, and at times even more so. He states that out of 1,700 cures, which he has made, 50 were of people he had never seen, but had merely communicated with by letters. The Miracle Man is not a man of education, but a simple cobbler who knows nothing of the science of medical arts. He has an absolute and almost childish faith in God. And finally, the Miracle Man takes no credit for his cures. He said God is through him, And Brother Columba left this morning on the 10th at 10:30 on the Big 4 for Indianapolis. That's a train. He does not travel much, but for the most part stays at Notre Dame, and his patients come to him. In fact, Brother Columba was given great latitude to go any place he wished to go. He writes to his friend Father Giglinger, who has invited him to come to Keokuk, and he said, ask your superiors when is the best time, and Columba writes back and simply says, they don't really care where I go. And part of that is because he was raising scads of money, which we'll talk about eventually. And he was given this latitude by Father Gilbert Francais, the Superior General. The final source for spreading news about Brother Columba are religious sisters. First among the hundreds are the many sisters of the Holy Cross who knew Columba and asked him to intercede either for themselves or relatives and friends. In 1913, Columba reported this to Father Giglinger. I was over to St. Mary's, a girls' school 1 mile from here. Lately, they had several cures there. While I was there, 10 sisters came up to me for cures. They went on their knees to me to make the sign of the cross on them with a badge. Would that not just kill you? Never looked for that. God honors and humbles me at the same time. In 1918, Notre Dame established its first summer school session. Over many years, hundreds of sisters from many congregations flocked to these summer classes. Many of them knew Brother Columba and had the opportunity to visit him either in his shoe shop or at the community house. At least one of these sisters, Benedictine nun Sister Lioba of the monastery of Covington, Kentucky, reported a cure from, quote, frequent attacks of heart trouble. I'm going to read that letter to you now. In fact, I'm going to end by reading 2 letters to you. One from the Benedictine sister, written in 1929. Now, 1929 is now 6 years after Brother Columba died. It's going to be a little hard for me to see, but I think I can do it. It's not that lengthy, but it is an amazing letter. In writing the petition to the bishop to ask him to consider the cause of Brother Columba, this is one of 7 cures, in this case miracles, that I presented. So this is from Sister Lioba, and there will be a second one from a 19-year-old girl living in Atlanta, Georgia at the time. Sister Lioba, for the glory of the most Sacred Heart of Jesus and in grateful memory of the saintly Brother Columba, I am herewith writing this account. From 1918 to 1923, I suffered frequent attacks of heart trouble. These attacks were very severe. I would lose breath, my face and fingernails would assume a purple color, my limbs would grow stiff, and I could neither move nor speak. My sisters and once or twice the Reverend Father would be frightened, fearing I should die. I was never able to walk fast, to lift anything heavy, to stay in a crowd or in a close room, to exert myself in any way, as any such thing would bring on an attack. Many times I had to sit up at night and struggle for breath. The physicians, after a thorough examination, stated it was a case of a leaking and enlarged heart, and that I would never be cured. He advised me to take life easy, to eat light food, and to be prepared for, as he said, anything you do will cause a catastrophe if you exert yourself in any way. Then in the spring of 1923, it was decided that some of our sisters were to go to Notre Dame to study for the master's degree. I would have liked to go, but our good Reverend Mother thought, owing to my condition of health, it would not be advisable to go. Nevertheless, she consulted our physician, who said, let her go. She can die just as happy a death at Notre Dame as at Covington, Kentucky. Of course, she must take things easy. The day before I left for Notre Dame, I had a rather severe attack. I arrived safely at Notre Dame, although I was quite tired. This was the first summer that our sisters went to the university. Therefore, our kind friends, the Benedictine sisters from Ferdinand, Indiana, made us acquainted. And when my sister companion told the sisters about my trouble, they took us to Brother Columba, that very evening and told him about it. I shall never forget the incident. Brother Columba said, "Have courage, sister. If you can trust in the Sacred Heart will cure you." Then he went into the house, brought out some Sacred Heart badges. He gave me 2 and the other sisters each one. Then he made the sign of the cross with 1 Sacred Heart badge over my heart, praying, "Most Sacred Heart of Jesus, I trust in thee." He bade me to wear the badge and to repeat that prayer 5 times daily. From that moment until now, I have never had another attack. In the past 5 years, I have endured many fatigues and exertions. I attended the Eucharistic Congress in Chicago and stood during the entire ceremony at Mundelein without discomfort. I researched that. That would have been 6 hours of standing. I work hard from early morning till late and am able to walk fast and to lift heavy. The Reverend Father Reiter, pastor of Holy Cross School, at whose school I have been stationed for the past 16 years, our Venerable Mother Prioress, and my sisters, whom I so often frightened by my attacks, all bear witness that the Sacred Heart of Jesus bestowed a great favor upon me through the holy prayer of Brother Columba. I should have written up this account the first year of my cure. However, our Venerable Prioress, shunning publicity, advised me to be grateful to the Sacred Heart in secret. Then 2 years ago, our Venerable Mother took very ill, and I promised to write up this account if she would recover. She did recover, and she now is gladly giving me permission to write this. Unfortunately, the physician died meanwhile, almost suddenly. I must confess it to my shame that always being rushed with work, I put off fulfilling my promise till now. My conscience lets me rest no longer, and indeed I fear Almighty God might send back my former trouble if I should not keep my word. And so in confirmation, this letter is signed by Reiter, by the Prioress, Mother Walburga, and by 6 sisters, Crescentia, Gorunda, Mildred, Catherine, Lutgardis, and Hilda, all in their own hand. We have this letter in the archive. Not quite that size, but we have it. The final letter that I will read to you, and then I'll be open for questions or whatever you wish, is from Velma Agnes Gorman. She writes this letter in 1921, and she's now 19 years of age. Dear brother, let me try to express my gratitude to you for the wonderful miracle you have performed on me through the Sacred Heart of Jesus. Over 2.5 years ago, when the Spanish influenza was at its worst, the telephone company for which I worked compelled all its members to be inoculated. After inoculation, I suffered great pain all the time with my arm. The pain never ceased for a minute, and I had a running sore all the time where the needle went into my arm. I bore the pain in silence, never telling anyone. Each day my arm grew worse, and at last I consulted our family doctor, who after a few treatments said, "The nerve in your arm has been punctured." A few weeks later, my arm and hand got paralyzed, and I was confined to my bed for several months. An X-ray picture was then taken of my arm, which showed the punctured nerve. After taking electrical treatments every day for 3 months, which proved useless, the doctors ordered an operation, an amputation, and said my arm and hand would never be of any use to me again. 5 specialists came to see me and would not handle my case. They told me it was useless to try anything. A woman who lives near my cousin, I think her name is Mrs. Ludrum, who has a brother who is a priest at Notre Dame, heard of my case. She said she would write to her brother at once and get a special cure badge from you, and she did. When I got your Sacred Heart badge, I pinned it over the bandages and glass shield which I had to wear. I at once started the 9-day novena to the Sacred Heart of Jesus. Each night before retiring, I said the litany of the Sacred Heart and prayed all the time for my cure. On the evening before the 9th day of the novena, my arm grew much worse. I nearly went insane. The pain was so great. I could not fall asleep, and when I rose, about 7 a.m., the pain had ceased. This was the first time in 2.5 years the pain had stopped. When the bandages and glass shield were removed that morning, the running sore had stopped. There was not even a scab on it, only a scar. I can't express my joy. I could use my arm again, and the pain and the running sore had ceased. My poor paralyzed arm was cured. I can use my arm again, and it is gaining strength rapidly. My doctors and folks and everyone who saw my arm were astonished. The doctors said they could not understand it. It was a miracle, end quote. It is useless for me to try to express my thanks to you, brother. I shall never forget you for what you have done for me. She finally says that she has taken her badge and she has placed it on a silk pillow, and she reveres it, and she asks Brother Columba, shall I return it to you? Do you need it for another cure? And then at the end, she simply says, P.S. My age is 19 years. I want to send an offering. Please let me know what your usual fee is, end quote. Thank you.
Brother, I can help moderate some questions.
Surely.
Raise your hand, we'll get a question, and then we'll have Brother repeat the question into the microphone so those on the live stream can hear it.
Brother will try to do that.
Right.
Professor Cloud.
Yes.
Part of what brought us here is I have a son who had some, in the words of the doctors and in our own thoughts, that are nothing but miraculous, praying in the grotto. That's part of what brought us here. And as an Aggie in the band, we have our own stories about a cobbler whose family served us for 100 years, but no miracles associated with him. The reason I say that, though, and what makes me think, is that are there any books, movies, anything else to get the word out about this wonderful life of meekness?
There is a website, and the website is brothercolumba.com. Brother Ernest wrote the only biography, 58 pages long. Ernest was famous for writing biographies for, let's say, middle school and early adolescence on the lives of the saints. He published over 350, and he wrote a number of them. And so that is it. That's been now translated into French and into Portuguese and into Bengali. And interestingly enough, we can find no one who will take it on in Spanish for reading, so to speak. That's all online. Other than the newspaper articles that I have read to you, I'm not aware that there is anything. I actually searched, YouTube the other day to see if anything had been put on there, and it has not, and so forth. There might be something on Facebook or one of these, but I don't know. It is interesting that when Brother Columba died in 23, there were hundreds and hundreds of people who came to the university to pass before his casket. By 1933, the apostolate of the Sacred Heart was reinvigorated by a Brother Columbanus Murphy. And Brother Columbanus was a very good friend of Brother Columba's, and he was the treasurer for the Ave Maria Press. I have yet to be able to find any information relative to Columbanus getting things done for Brother Columba from a standpoint of print, but I'm fairly certain that lots and lots was done by the Ave in that arena. When Brother Columbanus died, then a Brother Sabinus Herbert took over. And Sabinus was an actual publisher who had came into the community as a young man and was hired at the Ave Maria. And after the second day, the priest in charge of the Ave Maria said, I'm in charge, but that's the guy who will get things done. And Sabinus was extremely active in promoting Brother Columba. He writes a letter to Father O'Toole at one time saying, we need to present this man's cause for sainthood. But at the time, Blessed Moreau and St. Andre were what the community was following. But O'Toole says, as soon as that's done, Brother Columba is next. Sabinus died of a massive stroke at breakfast in 1954. And then 2 other brothers were given the cause. Each of them lasts but 1 year. And so I would say around 1956, whatever Columba items were boxed up and put in the archives. And in 2020, I happened to be in the wrong place and looked up, and 3 boxes on the shelf, Brother Columba correspondence. So that's how that gets going. So that's a long way of saying no to your, to your question.
Good morning, brother. Thank you
Good
very
morning.
much. My name is Diane Barlis, teacher at
Just a little louder, please.
My name is Diane
Yeah.
Barlis,
Yeah.
and I teach here at Holy Cross College. And I wonder if you can tell us what the next step is for CCO.
I can. Yes, I can tell you what that is. And I'm now speaking with the words of Bishop Rhodes. In June of this year, the National Catholic Conference of Bishops will meet, and Bishop Rhodes is on the agenda. And he will then ask the bishops to, I would imagine, sign off on sending the cause to Rome. He is going to give them, he told me, they will all have, prior to my petition, something that has been written, that I wrote apparently. He said to me, we'll have no problem at all with moving the cause to Rome. He believes it'll happen on the Feast of the Sacred Heart in June. The bishop declared officially servant of God last year on the Feast of the Sacred Heart. Sacred Heart and Immaculate Heart of Mary are back to back, which is kind of interesting, I think. So that's what I know. Now, postulator for the, I think I moved this, postulator for the church and the world, not really quite. I think what will happen, in fact I know what will happen, is that once this cause moves to Rome, I just become the researcher. I'm the guy who will be probably asked questions about certain things that have been sent or written, and a postulator will be assigned in Rome. Perhaps it might be the same one who is working on the cause of Venerable Patrick Peyton. I am unsure. I don't know, but that's when I officially become the researcher. As I said, there are about 6,000 items. 4,000 of these items have been read and cataloged, maybe 2,000 to go. And I have not read all of those items, but there's a brother who I don't think is here, Brother James Kane, who has assisted me by developing what I'll call the grand database. And he has read at least the summary of every one of those 4,000 letters and put it into the database so that we can begin to find information readily, so to speak. So, yes, I think it's going to go to Rome in June.
Thank you, Brother Andrew Pompecki here. I'm going to sneak in 3 questions about the story of Brother Columba as you shared it. When you were talking about the log chapel, and my understanding, it sounded like there was maybe an image of the Sacred Heart there in the log chapel that got moved over to what we call the Paris Center now. Does that image exist? Is it around the one that Brother Columba kind of saw?
I do not know.
We don't know. Okay. The cobbler shop, I was kind of thinking about that. Like where on campus was that? I was just trying to picture, like this brother, doing the shoes and all that attached to one of the buildings. And then the third question was, I'm curious to hear about this Sacred Heart badge.
Yes.
Do you know more about what they look like? Do you have one?
I do. I know about all that. I was very limited with time, and so I'm glad that you asked. So the question about where was the cobbler shop? We think it was in 4 different locations during the time that he worked there. First, definitely was in the manual labor school. Then we think it went to Baden Hall. Then it might have gone to the basement of Washington Hall. And finally, we believe it was what was called the Old Gymnasium. There is a peace fountain at Notre Dame. When I entered the congregation, that was the Old Gymnasium. And it had a top floor. I don't know what was there, but the bottom floor was for artists, priests and brothers who had special things going on, and apparently Brother Columba was there. Columba contracted Spanish influenza in 1918, the very summer that the Notre Dame began its summer sessions. He was never quite up to a lot after that. By 1920, I think I might have something here. All right, there. That's Columba, we think around 1922. He is seated outside the community house. This is a year before he dies. And notice he is no longer that robust photo character we looked at. He's obviously extremely racked by, I suppose, lung trouble. When Sister Lioba comes to see him in the spring of 23, he dies in November of 23, he was no longer at the shop. They actually went to the community house. The letter indicates to me they weren't even invited in, probably because he could not. But when he hears what she needs, he goes in and gets the badges. Okay, what was your last question? Did I answer them all?
What did the badge look like?
Oh, I don't know whether, I think I have it. That's Brother Columba's statue of the Sacred Heart, which is now in the archives, probably 100, 125 years of age. Columba states in a letter that the very, very, very tough causes, he would write the name of the petitioner on a piece of paper and slip it under the statue. We have several people who come in every now and then and slip names under the statue. So that much has gotten around. Okay. That's an original Sacred Heart badge. Now, Brother Columba states that he made, yes? Oh, Brother Columba states that he made 30,000 of these. What I think Brother Columba did is he got the decals, and he pasted the decals on felt, and then with a pair of scissors, he crimped that out himself. We have 6 of them. Father Kuhn in the archive across the street has 123 of the original badges. Notre Dame doesn't have any. As it goes, people would ask for badges, he would send them. He never asked for money, but people would include money now and then as an offering to the shrine. He also created, and I think I have a picture of it. Yes. He also created what he called badges of the Immaculate Heart of Mary. That's obviously a decal, and it's the only one we have. It has been pasted to some kind of an account book. Columba was a type A. He accounted for everything, especially when it came to money. I don't even know what's on the other side of that. He contends that he made 10,000 of those, which I think, again, perhaps means that he actually adhered it to some kind of felt, cut it out, and then sent them. You couldn't get your shoes out of the shoe shop unless you took a Sacred Heart badge along with the shoes. That's the fact. If I'm extenuating my time, just get the hook.
Brother Philip gave me badges when we met
Yes.
a month ago.
Yeah.
So what I'm passing out right now are badges, not original badges, but maybe the same efficacy if you're using them with prayer and faith and devotion. So I have more as well if you'd like to grab them. And I did have a question for you, brother. Is as an institution that was established by the brothers and passionate about our charism, what are some ways that our college community can help further the cause of Brother Columba, especially our students?
Well, I think it's fostering the devotion to the Sacred Heart of Jesus, and the devotion to the Immaculate Heart of Mary was even new to me in 2020. When I was a kid, my mother was a Protestant. She was a Scotch Presbyterian, and in the morning before we left for school, she would check our undershirts to make sure the Sacred Heart badge was pinned to the undershirt. You didn't get out without the Sacred Heart badge. I was educated by the Sisters of the Holy Cross. My mother inconveniently one day went to see the sisters, and from that time on was a far better Catholic than my father ever was, who was a daily attendant at Mass. We adhered to whatever the sisters told us to adhere to. These Sacred Heart badges are plastic now because they wear out. Many people write letters to Columba saying, I need a new badge because mine is now worn out. You can get them in several languages. Devotion to Margaret Mary Alacoque, who is the person who apparently decided that people should at least carry an image of the Sacred Heart. All that and the Sacred Heart stuff, I believe, is under the auspice of the Jesuit fathers. I got the Sacred Heart badges that I wanted from New York, and when I wrote the letter about what I was doing, the guy said, I can send you many thousands in 5 or 6 different languages. So they are certainly promoting that devotion. And perhaps that devotion is on the rise again, Sacred Heart. So, I believe promoting the devotion to the Sacred Heart and promoting the fact that, in the gospel, we're told that if you have faith the size of a mustard seed, great things can happen. Obviously, Columba's faith was remarkable, but he expected that kind of remarkable faith, I think, in a lot of the people that ended up getting their favors received. And people who record those in depth consistently talk about the devotion to the Sacred Heart that was fostered in them by Brother Columba.
Final question, the provincial.
Ooh.
Thank you, Brother Philip.
Yeah.
In addition to being a Catholic for the university, are there any stories of Brother Columba's influence with the students at the university?
Quite a few. Brother Columba was a real devoted individual to the prayer life and the spiritual life of, at that time, the men of Notre Dame, and constantly talks about that. He personally promoted daily Mass with daily communion. And this was prior to Pius X stating that, well, maybe we should try that. And I know the story that Brother's hoping I'll tell, and I will. Apparently, the provincial, I believe, comes to Brother Columba and says, the fathers want you to stop this business because all they're doing now is hearing confessions and they don't have time for such. And Columba writes to his friend Father Giglinger, in obedience, I stopped, but I continued to pray. Something like 3 or 4 weeks after this happened, that very provincial was changed to a parish someplace out in the hinterland. Within a few months, that priest becomes deaf and now appeals to Brother Columba to cure him. And Columba tells his friend Giglinger, I'm not sure I can do that. And then in, not even parentheses, but in big bold letters, I guess he won't have to worry about going to confession anymore or hearing them. And he had a very wry Irish wit and so forth. He tells many stories about Father Soren, and he was. We have letters saying, when you come to our house again, Brother Columba, we'll have corned beef and cabbage on the stove. He liked a good cigar. He liked a beer, and so forth. There's a funny story about Brother Adolphus going to the cook, asking for 2 beers, one for me and one for Brother Columba, and Brother Columba reporting back to the superior, I never got the beer. He says, I think this Adolphus has a problem. Okay, I think I'm really toward the end of my time, I think. I don't know.
Well,
Thank you. Thank you.
And before we conclude, I think we have in a few moments of reception and some chance to mingle. But these days, beginning yesterday with our day of service today, with our academic symposia, several events throughout the day, certainly are all gathered around the inauguration of Dr. Farns. So to conclude our time this morning, we'd like to call on Marco to say a few words at the beginning of our academic symposium. Dr. Farns.
Thank you. And before Brother leaves the stage, can we just give him a round of applause again for starting? You all will hear plenty from me over the next 2 days, so I will keep this brief. But I really, as a Brothers College, proudly as a Brothers College, this was the perfect way to start off inauguration weekend. For us to learn about the hope and healing that this miracle man of Notre Dame, Brother Columba, brought to the world. You know, isn't that what the Brothers Ministry is all about? Is bringing hope and healing to the world. And by extension, isn't that the ministry of what we do here at Holy Cross College? Is bringing hope and healing to the world. In my nearly 30 years of working with the brothers, having studied under the brothers, and then working with the brothers, it's always fun to travel and to ask people to describe the brothers. And you hear some common phrases and words that resonate. Hope is probably number one. Helpful is always among that. No job too small. No job too small. Humorous. I think we saw and heard some of that today. Hospitable. I know I've personally experienced that numerous times, especially at Columba Hall, on a number of visits that I've made there. And that is, I was asked the question yesterday, what's the charism for this brother's charism for the congregation of the cross? That's it right there. Hope, healing, humor, hospitality, always. And it's through that we can eradicate division, distress, and despair that exists in this world. Last thing I want to mention is, brother, the archives that you have collected, organized, cataloged, you and others, are remarkable. And I hope that if you've not had the opportunity to visit those archives, that you get a chance to do that. Absolutely remarkable. No more than about 200 steps away from right here at the Province Center, at the front entrance, is where they're located. And I know my wife Peggy is hopeful to work more with you, brother, as we bring our Board of Trustees to campus twice a year, and have their spouses have a chance to engage with these remarkable archives. 6,000 letters, 6,000 documents that you have in Brother Columba Park. So we invite you, and we also pledge to you that there's always going to be a home for the Brothers Archives and the Brother Providence figure of the Cross College. So thank you again, Brother Philip. Thank you all for being with us today, and what a great start to the
Let's conclude at 11 o'clock. We have a real special treat of music by a special choir that has students from Holy Cross, St. Mary's, and Notre Dame, the Echoes. So you'll want to come back for that right here in Bristol Auditorium. So let's gather for refreshment.
Ready for
Yeah.